Hi everyone, I'm Mims and welcome back to the channel. You will hear the rest of the coffee brewing in the background and you may hear Jupiter. So, this is my video to talk about the first 2 weeks of Drop 'em 78. In case you're new or in case you don't know what Drop 'em 78 is, Drop 'em 78 was started a few years ago by Esther from Mindful Tarot, and it is the last 78 days of the year, and it's a card a day. It's the tarot deck, and the idea is that you're pulling a card a day in a particular order, and the way that it's set up, or the way that she had it organized, is it goes with the acronym. So D is drop anchor with the Pentacles, and then R is respond with the wands, and then O is open up with the cups, and then P is pierce with the swords, or pierce through with the swords, and then M for drop 'em. M is manifest with the majors. So, and the idea is that you start with Ace of Cups, and then Ace of Pentacles, and you're going through. So I'm recording this the morning of Wednesday. I had actually hoped that I could record it yesterday, but I needed to think about it more. And so my plan is to record a video after every suit. So I'm wrapping up the Pentacles from yesterday, and I want to make a video, and then I'll make one so every couple of weeks, and then at the very end of the year it'll be the a little over 3 weeks for the majors. The way that Esther organized it, you can post on social media and so forth, and that had been my plan. And I actually had a buddy, and I need to get in touch with her. I'm recording this before I even texted her. But it was too early to text. So, let's just start with what it is. So, what I'm doing is I'm using 2 different decks. Obviously you can do it how you want, right? You can kind of change the general guidelines, but Esther's idea was that you're really just using one deck for the entire course of that challenge, or of the challenge. Now, I'm using other decks outside of this, but I'm only using kind of one major deck, and then a secondary deck is what she calls a calibrating deck. And you can do that a few different ways. You could compare the same card to same card, or if you're you could pull a card and then kind of compare and contrast. And within the day, you can notice things like, what's the typical meaning? What do you happen to notice in the card? How is your day like that particular card's meaning, etc. And so the 2 decks that I'm using the American Renaissance Tarot by Thea Wirsching and illustrated by Celeste Pille. It's in a big box, and I love the box, but for the challenge, I put it in this bag, and then I am using a secondary deck. I'm using the Pixie's Line Art Tarot, which is just a black and white version of the Waite Smith, and it's just what you think, it's just the line arts. So what I've done, just to make it simple, is I've pulled the guidebook out from the American Renaissance Tarot, and I don't really need to use, it's just a tiny guidebook anyway. I'm not really using the guidebook from this. And then what I've been doing is just pulling out I'm keeping the whole American Renaissance Tarot in here, but what I've been doing is then just pulling out the suit of the one that I'm working on. So since we just wrapped up coins, I don't know why I keep saying cups. Since we just wrapped up the coins, I've put that whole suit in here, and then that way I can grab the bag, and then this the guidebook, and then I've got what I need for the day, and then my journal. So a couple of things, and I will show the cards. They're kind of a little bit, oh, here we go. Yeah, I'll just flip through them real quick, and then I'll kind of talk about it. Yeah, they're kind of all, at this point, they weren't mixed up yesterday, but they kind of are now. But one of the things that I will say is that I do like the black and white in contrast with the American Renaissance Tarot. For one, it's kind of nice to have it because not all of, while this deck is definitely in the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition, a lot of the time the scene isn't necessarily showing that. This is actually, for instance, this is the Ten of Cups. This is actually an image of Frederick Douglass when he visited Egypt and climbed the Pyramid of Ibiza, and also was quite old at that point when he did so. So yeah, let's just, these are not going to be in order. I had actually planned on them being in order, but they're going to be a little all over the place, kind of like I am today. So a couple of things about coins. I remember last year when I did this challenge, it was my first year doing it last year, and one of the things that really resonated for me was thinking more about my physical life. And really thinking, you know, because depending on, and of course we all have different interpretations, and the longer you go in tarot, I think the more nuanced and more layered your meanings get with the cards. You know, because they start to build in more. And we often think, and maybe because I do remember at the beginning, I was very literal when I was learning tarot. And so I thought about coins as money and the aspects of money, property, jobs, things like that. But I've come more and more to think more about pentacles as just aspects of your physical life. So it might be, sure, it could be money, but it could also be, and you know, you think of your physical life, sure, it might be the house where you live or don't live. It could also be, you know, what you're taking into your physical body, you know, your diet. I hate the word diet, but you know, what you're eating and what you're watching, what's going in. And, you know, what we watch, what we read, who we talk to, what our physical world encompasses. You know, who's in your physical world. And, you know, we're in the day and time where being in touch with someone via a text is fairly simple, even if they're not maybe someone that would be in your physical life otherwise. Now, in comparison to like this time, the American Renaissance Tarot was is depicting life in the US and, you know, looking at its history in the early 1800s, like 1820 to 1870, somewhere in there. And in that case, you know, letters, and people would travel really far to see someone if they were able to travel, if that was even a possibility. So I've been thinking a little bit about my physical life and what that entails. And there have been some changes pretty recently in my family. And without getting into it, the night before, it was either the night before or the night of the first day of the Drop 'em 78 challenge, my world erupted a bit. And I mean my physical world. Some things have happened, and the consequences have a lot to do with someone else, and what are the choices on the way forward, what sorts of decisions. So it was kind of a shock. And it reminds me, I remember somebody last year talking about that whenever they've done the Drop 'em 78, whether they completed it or not, and I think this is someone who had done it for several years, had said that almost always there was a big kind of shake-up moment while they were doing Drop 'em 78. And I thought that was interesting. I remember last year having a pretty significant argument, disagreement with someone within my physical world, and it really made me need to touch base and so forth. So again, you know, I'm not trying to be all dramatic and then not tell you the stuff. I will say though that things can change very quickly. You know, your life as you know it can be very different in 24 hours. And that's apparent when you're thinking about cards like these, right? And you're thinking, as we're moving through the cups and we're thinking, or through the coins, and we're thinking about the, you know, the lives portrayed in these pictures. And as you're moving through, you know, often when you're doing a reading, you're not necessarily thinking about, like, you know, we often think about the Fool's journey within the tarot, but there's also a journey within each suit, right? You know, if you think about it numerically, if you think of it that way, then you can think about like a journey from 1 through 10. There's even a little journey, you could think of it like from page to king, in that regard, or you could sort of think about that journey from ace through king, or however your cards are labeled. But these shakeups, I think, help me to take stock. And it also reminds me that the times of my life when I thought things were pretty sturdy and stable, and then the times of my life when it felt where things were precarious in terms of things, some of that is perception. Some of that has more to do with what I think about it or feel about it than, you know, what the reality is. And those shakeups make you realize, or make me realize, that sometimes things were maybe not that stable anyway, but it takes those little shake-up moments, and they don't have to be tower moments. It could be a tower moment, but you know, when you think of the tower and you think of things falling, you know, people falling and like the unstable structure. But sometimes we build our lives on things that are not very secure, or in an illusion, maybe because we don't want to examine the cracks in the foundation, for instance. Maybe we don't want to look more deeply at our behavior and so forth. So anyway, I will say that, you know, I'm gonna move forward. I'm hoping that my Drop 'em 78 buddy will let me join back in with her. I'm also hoping that, you know, things do become more stable But one of the big things that I'm realizing from all of this is that I want to work really hard, and I've said this for a while to myself, but I think it just feels more apparent due to some events and things that have happened over the last couple of weeks. I want to work really hard so that I can find stability internally. Maybe it's not work hard, maybe it's relax into that. But I want to be able to reach for stability regardless of how topsy-turvy things are. So whether that's through meditation and breath work and some of that, and being able to reach for calm in the midst of moments that are not calm, so that I can find that quiet stability. You know, we think of Pentacles as earth and groundedness. I want to be able to find and become grounded, find it here, not look for it outward. I want to be able to find it so that in the moments of topsy-turvy, in the moments of uncertainty, in the moments of discord, in the moments of conflict, but also in the moments of sheer beauty and joy, that I can find that inner calm so that I'm not so impacted. I don't know. I know there's one of, I don't know which card it is but in the background of one of the Waite cards, you can see the topsy-turvy water. And I want to be able to be that, the calm boat, regardless of what the waves are like. And I've been thinking a lot about, like, how can I have that groundedness within my physical world so that it can help me, or within my spiritual world to help ground me in those times of topsy-turvy and so forth. So anyway, that's just a little bit of a ramble, but that's kind of what's running through my head. I hope you're well. I hope you're finding joy. I hope you're finding ways to take care of yourself and the earth and others in a mutual aid sense. And I hope to see you in another video. So in a couple weeks, I will do one on responding with the wands, but I'll have another video next week as well. Anyway, take care and thanks for being here. And I hope to see you in another video.